been a lot of talk about this being a new era for Hamilton. In fact, the new mayor, Andrea Horwath, mentioned those words in her inaugural speech at City Hall this past week. But what does it really mean to have a new era? You heard our political panel talk about it the day after the election, and there's been a lot of talk about it on social media since. But are the new councillors really aligned? Do the new councillors really have a vision in mind for a more progressive Hamilton? Well, according to some new research that just came out from iElect, they are aligned on the key issues that matter to you. So what does that mean going forward? And how are we going to keep them accountable to those progressive ideals? I'm so excited to have joining us here on the OShow the two founders of iElect, Graham Crawford, who is part of our election panel throughout. Graham, wonderful to have you back on the program, sir.
Great to be back, Laura.
And we, of course, saw you at the OShow event that we had celebrating the new era on the weekend, and we might get to some of that. There's a number of the new councillors in attendance that night.
I remember most of it.
As well as Murray Butriani and Terry Cook, which gave some great political context to a lot of our discussions, which was a lot of fun. So Ryan, we haven't had you on the program for a little while. What did you think of the election?
Pretty happy. So in terms of the original objectives of iElect and what we had set out to accomplish in terms of new and better leadership in Hamilton, I mean, obviously everything remains to be seen, but I feel probably hopeful, if that's a word, to use in regards to Hamilton City Council for the first time in a long time.
This is an active council in the full sense of that word. They're going to be active at council. I watched the GIC meeting yesterday, so it's their first meeting really as a full council. They're active. They're actively engaged. It's very refreshing. I'm with Ryan. It's nice to be hopeful for a change. They are picking causes that they believe in and always have believed in, by the way. So these are not photo ops. These are people who've been on those lines before. They're also speaking. Craig Cassar, for example, spoke at several of the demonstrations about related to the boundary expansion, the Ford push to have that done and to disregard council's and the public's wishes to keep the boundary intact.
Just before we leap into your research, I just want to touch on the article that Margaret Skimba wrote, because Margaret, is doing some really heavy lifting in trying to advance the conversation here in Hamilton. And that's why we so appreciate having her on our ongoing politics panel. And today, she actually looked at the words that Donna Skelly and Stephen Lecce have said about the Greenbelt. And as she said, they get a failing grade in math. Like, it doesn't even line up. What they're saying not only does it not make any sense, but she pretty much makes the conclusion that, either misinformed or deliberately disinforming the people of Hamilton.
I'm always keen to read Margaret's columns. I think she's just an excellent writer and a great analyst of things that are going on. What I really liked about this was, one of the points Margaret made was bad math. And is bad math bad faith? And in a very real way, because Donna does have a bit of a legacy here of saying stuff that's convenient. And unfortunately, I feel she's kind of making it up as she goes along, or she got her marching orders, she being Donna Skelly, from the Ford government. She's not even trying to connect with her community, with the words of her community, the beliefs of her community, the new council's agreement around the Greenbelt. She's just throwing stuff out there. And as I say, making it up. It's bad math. And unfortunately, I believe it's bad faith. I don't think she has any intention of listening to this community. The only person she's listening to is Doug Ford, because she wants to keep her job. That's it. She's not trying to do a good job. She's trying to keep a job.
Ryan?
No, I absolutely agree. I don't think there's any real commitment to authenticity or being essentially not disingenuous here. I think it's essentially, this is what we want to do now, and this is the talking point as we're going to change it. It's practically a Beaverton piece of just Ford government announces it's taking a break from telling one thing to start telling us another.
Yeah. And so where Margaret, I think, was very, as I said, eviscerating with Donna Skelly was she said, you know, you should hang your head in shame as a former reporter to be putting out stuff that isn't true. There's no doubling of the lands that are going to be made available. By Margaret's math, it's not even replacing the lands. There's no argument to be made that there isn't a solution for the incoming wave of immigration. In fact, Margaret makes the point that either Donna read the city's plan around the urban boundary and densification and is being disingenuous, or she didn't read it at all, right? Which how are you representing a community at the provincial table if you haven't even read the community's own laborious efforts? Go ahead, Graham.
Well, in fact, let me comment on her role as a counselor when her short term as a counselor before she used it as a stepping stone to where she is now. It was very obvious because I was an avid council watcher. She hadn't read reports. She asked questions that were the answers were obvious in the reports, and staff said so. When she would ask a question of staff would say, well, Councillor Skelly, that's on page 3 of the report. And I'm not kidding. It wasn't page 197 where you can forgive somebody for maybe not getting that far or picking up that fact. This was in summaries, executive summaries. She hadn't read the reports. At least if she had read them, she forgot what she read. So I'll give her that. So there's a chance that she hasn't read the details of the Hamilton documentation and the staff reports and the council rationale and so on. Again, she's just using government talking points, and she's not even acknowledging there's a difference of opinion in her community, in her riding. It's not as if her riding is overwhelmingly supporting the expansion of the Greenbelt, because they're not. But she's not even acknowledging that. It's as if she's a floater. She doesn't actually belong in any community. She's like a comms person.
You know what? Hey, don't put down a comms person.
I used to be one of those too.
I will say this, a little bit of defense. If Donna was new to the gig, okay, because I gave the new councillors, John Paul, Maureen, and Narinder, a bit of break on Sewergate because they were brand new when they got kind of snowed under by council's BS line on that scandal. And then when they realized it, they came forward and whatever, but they were new. So I think we all looked at it and kind of stratified it from the pre-existing council that had known about Sewergate and covered it up before the last election. If Donna were new in the gig, I would say, as a former television reporter myself, who had the same job as Donna, you aren't ever reading very deeply because you have to go out, find your interviews, tape them, come up with a quick story and a bridge, check your sources, blah, blah, get it up on the air, perform it. You really are a little bit informed on a lot of things and not deeply on things. But that's that role because of the necessity of pumping out a story or two a day. That is not the same as sitting around as a representative for a community at the provincial level that has such an impact on our healthcare and on our environment and on our growth and all of these key issues in 2022. She has no excuse for not being better informed. And I have to say, honestly, I mean, it's just, it's substandard for what we deserve in our representation provincially, regardless of what party. I'm not partisan, right? I don't care, NDP, Liberal, or Conservative. Read the bloody reports. Understand the work that this community has done on the urban boundary. 30,000 Hamiltonians actively engaged in trying to help council come up with good plans. City staff, councillors work together, are united, had a plan. And here we have someone from the province, the mouthpiece for Doug Ford, not seeming to know that there was the freaking plan. Like, I can't take it. It's beneath us to accept this garbage.
Well, even to your point too, of just, work with the community. You represent the community, not Doug Ford. So at least have some sort of middle ground in between of working on solutions or working on compromises.
According to her former TV station, CHCH, said 400, other people said 600, but let's say 400 people lined up along York Boulevard near Dundurn the weekend after the announcement in the freezing cold. And CHCH could not reach or get comment from Donna Skelly's office or Neil Lumsden. Neither one of the provincial representatives could be reached on a morning when there's that many hundreds of Hamiltonians. And people will say, well, there's 600,000 people in the city that's not represented. Yeah, it is actually in a protest in this town. That is a big number of people out, and they keep getting bigger and bigger, but they couldn't even be reached for comment. So Graham, like, they're not trying. They don't care. They think they've got the majority. They think they're just going to roll over Hamilton. Is it going to happen? Or is there a fight that can be made here?
Well, I don't know if there's a fight legally or not that can be made.
Yeah.
What I do believe, though, is Hamilton will fight back. Not just Hamiltonians, but their elected leaders will fight back. I would not have said that prior to this election, this municipal election. We have a new council. And I don't think they are going to give in. They're going to stand up. And if Doug Ford steamrollers over our elected representatives in Hamilton and our staff, then that's what he's going to have to do, and he'll be known for that. But I don't believe for 1 second our council is going to try to just cave and just say, well, our hands are tied, like the old guard used to say all the time. Oh, it's up to the province. Our hands are tied. There's nothing we can do. Fred, why don't you send a letter? So Fred would send a letter, and then that would be it. That's their strategy. Well, it's on record that we oppose, and then we just sit back and let everything happen. That's not going to happen this time. Will they be successful? Well, I think we're all going to go down fighting if we're going to be unsuccessful. And I actually think there is hope here. And I will acknowledge that John Paul Danco's, Councillor Danco's, initial comment about how do we fight back, if you expand into the Greenbelt, you have to service the land. Well, we pay for that, not the province. And if it's not in our budget to service the land, then you can build all the houses you want, but you can't connect them to sewers. There's not going to be any roads built. There won't be electrical. There won't be fire service. And if you say, well, look, our hands are tied, our infrastructure deficit is so large that we don't have any money to expand it, so therefore we're going to do this. If the province then comes in and says, well, here's $100 million to put in the services, or $400 million, or whatever that number is, but it's a lot of money. Because remember, servicing, some people don't seem to understand this, but servicing is not just the pipes in the ground and the ground itself, but it's also fire service and EMS and police service. All that, because you have to add people. You can't just say, well, fire trucks, maybe it'll take you 15 minutes to get there instead of 7.5 minutes. It's not good enough. So you got to do stuff. You have to spend money, hire staff, buy equipment, build buildings. It's hugely expensive. And if people also falsely think that, well, the new taxes will pay for all that, they don't. We know they don't. This is not a scare tactic. The numbers don't work.
Yeah, no, well, I would just add to Graham's comment too that, well, first of all, literally add to your sentence of get Fred to write a letter. I think it's grudgingly get Fred to write a letter, because that would likely only happen after a certain amount of complaining and griping online from people like us, that finally be okay. There's finally a letter coming out. I think one thing that was really reassuring to see
or
was
being asked
right
to write the letter, or being asked to write the
yeah, exactly. But right from the mayor-elect, at the time the mayor-elect down to the councillors-elect, that you already saw a response online, at least, at the very least, statements and opposition to that. So that was a very reassuring, good thing to see. But yeah, absolutely. In terms of servicing those lands, that does. Graham brings up a great point that, yeah, I mean, that becomes potentially a weapon or a counter that Hamilton can offer is that aspect of the costs that go into it from a city perspective. And if you can't do it, then that becomes a point.
I think we have possibly a united front on this, and a united front is hard to beat. And if they can keep up the momentum, and because the Greenbelt affects us in terms of climate change, quality of life mitigation. It affects people in poverty. Our environmental panel spelled it out beautifully on the last OShow. I recommend that people go back and watch that, because we had some real experts around the table. We had Linda, of course, Dr. Lukasik from Environment Hamilton talk about it. We had Don McLean from Catch and Save Our Streams, who had a great historical context on all of it. And we had Mark Cripps, who worked inside the Ministry of Municipal Affairs, giving tactical stuff, like write emails, legit emails to Donna Skelly and Neil Lumsden. Do not think just because maybe you're not a conservative that they won't read your email, and don't make it a form one, make it a real one and get kids involved. I mean, Mark had a lot of great tips, so I recommend that people watch it. Go ahead, Graham.
Well, yes, and I watched the show and I agree with you, because Mark also mentioned, because he now works in the insurance industry.
Yes.
And so back to urban sprawl, if John Paul Danko's strategy is a viable one, any person in an insurance company, one of the first questions they're going to ask you is, how far away is the nearest fire hydrant? And if you don't have one, you don't get insurance.
Wow.
So you can't move in. So the point is, builders can build these houses if they want, but people can't move in because they won't be able to get insurance. Not to mention not being connected to water, et cetera, et cetera. Like one of the things I loved about what Mark was doing in that show, Laura, is he was connecting all of these pieces. That, you know, if you move into wetlands and start building, you better find out how the insurance companies are going to deal with that, because they're not looking to give you insurance if your basement's going to be flooded or your first floor is going to be flooded every 18 months. There's just practical stuff that gets in the way. We can't just pretend that everything works, no problem. We have we'll engineer our way out of the problem. No, you won't.
Well, when you said connected to development, I thought you were going to say like the actual connections between developers and council and staff. And you recall Brenda, before she left council, decided not to run again, she made it very clear that the relationship between some developers in the community and city staff, and the way that they were intimidating and all of that. And we look at Maria Pearson, who got ousted by Jeff Beattie. And Jeff talked here on the OShow. He's being very diplomatic and respectful, but he talked about the fact that, you know, she had a history publicly of working with developers, right? And having funds from developers, donations from developers. I mean, this is stuff that's on the public record. Do you see this council as being more liberated from those expectations maybe of the development industry, the fact that they're going to just go along because, you know, beggars can't be choosers and we need development money, and so, you know, solve all our problems, developers, you know, go into 49-year secret deals, developers, whatever it takes to take the work away from us.
There's no depth of thought. There was development. We need development. Okay, here's development, and it's a word. There was no actual, you know, depth of thought on what kind of development. How does that development take place? What does it look like in terms of downtown, in terms of how it fits into a community? I think back with just even the Greenbelt is also the context of thinking about it in terms of the depreciation of the developments that happen, that you'll have council thinking about not just the cost of servicing these lands to begin with, but the fact that when you create a large subdivision, or when you create these parcels of land that all launch at the same time, the depreciation is time. So it's not a single organic growth of a house on the outskirts that you service and you have one line to service. You have that service coming up again in a determinable amount of time. And that's something that I think this council will think about, is the comprehensive long-term view of what development means, rather than just, there's a developer at my door and I'm going to help them however I can because it sounds good.
Well, and I think about Jason Farr's video, his sort of last argument, the closer video, the thing that you're supposed to like win this tight election. And it's him basically doing a shill video for the development industry, a building over here and a building over, and I'm watching it going, what is that? It's a commercial.
And wear a collar. Like,
what's that?
Wear a collar. Yeah, you're an elected leader.
So I mean,
like a teenager.
I had a conversation with the developer at a restaurant downtown just before the election, and he did not believe that Jason Farr was not going to win again, because Jason was just pro-development and Hamilton needed development. And we got into an argument, and I said, well, you know, I'll talk to you on Tuesday, because I said, I don't think that people normally get 70,000 views of anything in this town, but Cameron Crutch gets them because he was working his butt off for 4 years acting as a counselor. And he was, and I said, you know, like, if you think it's going to be the same way, it won't be. It's going to be a new era starting on Tuesday. I haven't had a chance yet to see this guy again and talk to him about the results of the election. But I mean, Jay's video to me was just like, this is not going to be good enough anymore. You know, these counselors aren't going to be able to just take whoever knocks on the door because they're taking the work away from them, or because they feel like they don't understand the real situation, or they don't want to put the effort in, or they want to take a nap on their futon or whatever else, right? This is a situation where we're going to have counselors actually work really hard. So what are some of the other areas that you saw in your candidate surveys that the winning candidates, the new counselors, had strong alignment? Graham, let me go to you from iElect.
Well, first of all, just to provide a bit of context, as you know, there was a resident survey that we did. So, and we've got several thousand people responding to that, and they gave us areas of their biggest concerns and down to their least concerns. We then also put together a questionnaire for candidates, and we sent it to all candidates. And Ryan could talk more about that process, but we took our 6 areas that spell iElect: infrastructure, economy, leadership, environment, community, and transportation. And we asked each candidate to identify 3 concerns that they thought the city was facing that needed to be addressed in each of those 6 areas. So what concerns you most about infrastructure, about economy, et cetera? We also then did ask them, what would you do? What would 3 solutions or ideas? So they answered those personally as well. Now, we got responses from the majority of the new councillors.
They are united on the issue of protecting that urban boundary, more so than perhaps any other issue before. And actually, Councillor Danko said as much when he responded to Ford's, and in his words, betrayal of Hamilton and all of the planning process that had gone into it. And so to see both the last term of councillors who are still there, Maureen and John Paul and Narinder, so powerfully aligned around the Greenbelt, and then to have these new councillors come in like Kassar, who has a history on this issue. Ryan, do you think that there is a chance that they are going to be able to be so united that they can in fact stop Ford, that they can refuse to service those lands, that they can hold strong?
I think absolutely, yeah. And I mean, it certainly comes down to what is possible and what's a city able to do. I think the biggest factor here, the biggest strength, is the fact that you won't have the infighting. So you'll have the ability for a council to actually devote time to alternatives and solutions rather than bickering around the table. And I think that's the core difference. So whether or not they can actually do something against the province, you know, that remains to be seen, and that's a big question mark in terms of the division of powers. But in terms of a council that's actually able to accomplish and come up with strategies and solutions, I think we have one.
You know, it's interesting. Now, let me ask you, Ryan, was Spadafora one of the people who responded? Because I feel as though he is the one councillor that is coming into this term of council with a cloud over, you know, the whole thing with saying that Mayor Fred had endorsed him on the robocalls when Fred was saying he didn't endorse him, and the fact that the vote came down to 79 votes in that riding between Spadafora and Kojo, and you know, some of the stuff going around in that race. Was Spadafora one of the people that we're seeing this alignment with, or is he a bit of an outlier of council?
No, he was not. The only responses we received for Ward 14 were Kojo and Colleen Wicken.
Okay.
Yeah.
And so when you look at the alignments, what else was a strong sort of, I guess I'm looking for? The urban boundary, clearly they don't want to budge on that. They want to work together and fight, as we've discussed at length. But what else, Ryan, stood out to you as being, I don't know, maybe a surprise, or just is, you know, something that you wouldn't imagine to see so many councillors be so clear about?
I mean, I noticed that there was, particularly within economy, a lot of support and interest in small business. and supporting small business within the community. So that was something prominent to me, especially because you had, I know a number of councillors have been, painted the label of being anti-business or no one's going to want to start a business here. But by and large, I mean, they were all talking about the support of small business and of making things easier for small businesses in the community. So that was a big one that I particularly noticed. But also then related to zoning and how zoning impacts small business and making things easier across the board as well for those looking to do that within the community, which is something that is really desperately needed. I mean, small businesses make up both the Canadian economy and the city economy, no matter how much we want to talk about some of the larger industries. The 90% of the city is small business.
Go ahead.
Well, what I can tell you, just again, you can look at the details on our website, but affordable housing was by far number one. Everybody said the same thing. People talked about safer streets as well. That was consistent. And part of safer streets was investment in transit. That was a high priority. Now that doesn't necessarily mean safer streets. On the other hand, because Laura, I do want to make this point. I believe what this new council brings is not just a desire for strategic thinking, but a skill at systems thinking. They know how this stuff fits together. So that, and they want another number one priority was a fully integrated infrastructure plan. And they said fully integrated. That means they're system thinking. They're thinking it in the bigger sense, not just how do we keep our roads, fully paved and pothole free. That's not an integrated infrastructure plan, because they also talked about water management. They want an integrated, fully funded, because this is the issue. You can build all the plans you want, and staff built plans for the old guard. The old guard wouldn't fund them, at least not to the extent they needed to be funded. So this council, although they don't have an unlimited bank account, but what they do have is a desire to figure out how are we going to do with this. But they want it to be specific and integrated and funded. There's no point in having a plan you can't possibly fund. Why would you bother? It would only end up upsetting you.
I love that, because you and I have spoken for years on the OShow about the culture of mediocrity at City Hall, about the low standards, about, just kind of getting things done at the bare minimum, even showing up to meetings this week, they were on time, right? And here you're talking about system thinkers, strategists coming in around that council table, and it makes me very excited. And when you brought up, guys, that the number one sort of thing that came across in the candidate surveys was affordable housing and the priority on that. Here on the OShow, I guess I'll announce it now, we are putting together an affordable housing panel, and Jeffrey Nevin from Inwell is going to be a part of it, and Tom Cooper, and we're filling out the rest of it. But we want to have a panel just like we do with the environment and just like we do with politics to really stay on top of these big issues that are not flash in the pan stuff. They are going to go on for years, and we need to have really good thinking and analysis and understanding around them.
On the one hand, you have, say, the first term councillors that we had talked about of Danko, Wilson, and Ann, who had been kind of bound together pretty strongly across the past term, finding now new support and new colleagues around the table who are aligned with their vision. And then you have the newcomers coming in who want to come in with an open mind. So they're not coming in with a history. They're not coming in with a chip on their shoulders. They're coming in with the willingness to want to work with people. And you even see that, there is some division of across some of the new councillors. But yeah, one thing that's clearly evident is the fact that they really still are open. They're talking. They're wanting to work together. They're wanting to find and act on those common grounds. I mean, in my other hats, that's something I've seen too, in terms of even just outreach to council, just to set up understandings that. They're talking about, I'm going to try to get X person to join me in a meeting. And it's not something you would maybe typically have expected if it were party lines.
How do we apply a critical lens to a group of individuals who seem well-meaning, progressive, who's a lot of their policies I personally support? How do we stay critical and be able to speak truth to power?
Well, it's interesting. It's a great question, Laura, because I've been giving that some thought because this change is so significant, not just in terms of names, but also principles and priorities, that it's a very positive change. What you don't want to do, at least what I'm not going to do, is to leap in and be critical prematurely. I think people need to be given some space, but how do you define space? Some space. What is that? I'm picking just because it's easy to remember. So the first 90 days, I want to be more of an observer than a critical optimist. That doesn't mean I won't criticize. If there's a big blunder, then I think all of us will comment. But I don't want to be seen as nitpicking new people because they are new. It's not just a few new people at council, it's the whole council that's essentially new. Old guard, there's 2 old guard members left. 2, that's it. Tom Jackson, Brad Clark. Everybody else, 1 term or less. So I want to sort of observe, but I think that's actually why it's very important that we talk about council priorities, because I don't want to just sit back and say, oh, let's see what happens. Who knows? It might work, it might not. We need to figure out what are they going to focus on, because I agree with what Ryan and you said, that they do seem very aligned, which is enormously refreshing. They also do get along. Laura, I saw the same thing at your party, just that camaraderie, that collegiality. But I've also seen it already at GIC. They're respectful. And by the way, all those people who said, oh, they're fresh, they won't know where to find the bathroom and so on, almost every single one of them has come in with community engagement experience. They have been involved. They're not just observing their community, and they're not just aware of what's going on. They've actually been engaged in groups and causes. That says to me they know how to collaborate, how to get along. And that's when all of us have done community work. You generally do it without a budget, or if there's a budget, it's a tiny, tiny budget. So you have to get along. You have to collaborate because there's no other way to do it. They're all usually non-hierarchical. So you have to, it's teamwork. It's true teamwork. They're used to that. And they're bringing that skill set to the council table. And because there's so many of them like that, I have very high hopes.
That's a great way of looking at it. They come in with that preset skill set. And you made me think of Tammy, who I was speaking to just briefly at the event, at the OShow event. And, she worked at the city in economic development. She's a brilliant person, and she has inside knowledge of how it looks from a city staffer point of view, which I thought she expressed so beautifully on the OShow we did at Canada Day when we first got to know her. She really understands how the city works. She's an optimist. She's professional. I mean, having her there with community organizing experience from some of the other candidates and the deep knowledge around environmental issues that Kassar, for instance, brings to the table. So much richness there that I don't know. I don't want to overstate it, Ryan, but you were one of the 2, and we hope to have Mary Lou back on the OShow soon. But you and Mary Lou did the fail list of council, and it was so long we had to do multiple episodes on it. How are you looking at this council and thinking, is there going to be a fail list, or are these people going to figure it out as a team and we just get to sit in the bleachers and watch?
Well, and that's, I'm certainly not looking to start one anytime soon. Obviously we'll see what happens. But to Graham's point too, there's just certain fairness and grace of just, okay, well, you knew, let's see, there's a lot of factors there, a lot of things crossed my mind. What was it? There was a former mayor who had a tweet about the longevity of people in certain roles and how, I want to see a mayor go on for multiple terms, because why would you leave the job when you're just starting? And it's like, you're just starting to learn a job after 8 years. Give it a year, give some months, let's let the rubber hit the road. But I think the other thing is that I just lost such faith in the previous term of leadership and some of those long-term incumbents that they just didn't seem like adults around a table to me. They didn't seem professionals. They didn't seem like they were leaders at all. They were characters to me. You bring up someone like Tammy, who obviously I've a close relationship with, as I've been business partners with her. And she's a born and bred leader. She's fantastic. She's wonderful. And I mean, I can't say enough good things about Tammy. She comes to this role with substantially more professional experience than I think the majority of those former councillors had. So I mean, when it comes to looking at the new term and looking at even the creation of a fail list, even if there was a fail list, I do not think we would see the same caliber of failures. I think we would see failures that are constructive, that are worthy of discussion, that are worthy of recognizing that maybe there were strategic missteps, that, you know, it's a higher discussion rather than just someone chewed out a gym store employee. Like, yeah.
I love that. I love the systems thinking, and I love people can go to the iElect website, which, by the way, didn't you guys have like thousands of views, page views, the days leading up to the election? Like, what was that like, Ryan? I think you guys had some huge numbers I read in your press release.
I mean, yeah, from someone who monitors analytics across a couple of accounts on a regular basis, and I mean, I used to oversee the analytics of one of Canada's leading tourist destinations. It was on that level within the days leading up to the election. Like it was substantial. I think the day of the election or the day before, there was about 10,000 visits in a single day, which is substantial for, first of all, a single city website, and a single city website that's a community group with volunteers.
And, yes, I know.
Yeah, based only on electoral issues.
Exactly, I was going to add, and it was about boring old politics. This wasn't even lifestyle.
Yeah.
Well, kudos to you both and to your whole team, because iElect got a lot of incoming fire for the fact that you were clearly having an impact. I mean, you were putting out information, literally just showing people what was happening at council, just showing what the old guard was saying and doing, you know, and asking people in the community to fill out surveys about what they cared about. You were basically just putting content in a place where people could find it easily and effectively. And you played a tremendous role in having people believe that they had enough information to oust the old guard.
Well, in fact, Laura, I think that thank you for that. That brings us to this point where we are at now, and that is, yes, we have a new council, so we do have new leadership, and we do want to focus on a better Hamilton. That's the whole rationale behind iElect, new leadership for a better Hamilton. We have priorities that the candidates who are now councillors said, this is what I care about. And we now know they are aligned on that. And they, as it turns out, are also very aligned with what residents said who filled in our survey. However, now the rubber meets the road. Having this data is one thing. Using this data is another. So I want to put out a request, and we did this in our media release. We would like to invite all of the councillors and the mayor, because the mayor did not submit a response to the iElect survey. We would invite them to look at what their colleagues have said and to let their colleagues know, but also to let us know. Do you agree? Are you in alignment? Because I think what they then need to do is to turn these priorities into strategic priorities for the city so that they can marshal not only the budget, the nearly $2 billion budget, but all of that staff expertise on 5, 7, 10 strategic priorities going forward. So the city manager's office aligns at the moment her city priorities with the council's priorities, as opposed to sort of very loosely connecting them, because everything was just very, quite frankly, shabbily done. It was unprofessionally done. It was fake metrics. It was fake. It was just crap. Having done a bunch of these in my business career, I mean, it was just crap.
Their metrics were crap. Their comms were crap.
Everything about it
was crap. Their debates were crap.
Their methodology was crap. Now that can change. And by the way, there are many members of this new council who know exactly what good looks like. They know how to do it. Yeah. So I think we have got to, as the public, hold their feet to the fire. this will be pleasant, I think, because no longer are we having to deal with the old guard who basically were focused on getting reelected and not so much on collaborating and cooperating. This council is the opposite. I think they are more focused on cooperating and building a better city than they are on getting reelected. There may be an exception or two, but I'm not even aware of who those people would be. But I was aware of all of the ones who were in the old guard council.
Well, I love Ryan, and we'll end the show here, but I love your characterization that they'd become characters. They were one dimensional. It was not the council that we have now. And I have a feeling that iElect is going to continue to be a vital force in keeping their feet to the fire. Thank you so much, Graham, for being here. And since it is coming up on Black Friday, and it's the retail holiday season, and you gentlemen give your time generously to the OShow. I want to give you a little plug, Ryan. Do we have some watches that you're selling this season? Tell us about how we can get our hands on some of your beautiful stuff.
Yes, we are. Lock and King, our fully mechanical automatic watches. We actually do have a Black Friday sale or offer on right now too, where you get a free additional strap with the purchase of any watch. And we'll also be at Stuffed. So if you do want to actually take a physical look at the watches before purchasing, because we are online only, Stuffed is a holiday gift giving show that's taking place at the Westinghouse coming up on December 2nd and 3rd. So you can
very,
find us there
very
as
cool.
well.
I love it. It doesn't get more local than that. And speaking of local and the holidays, if you've been admiring over my shoulder this gorgeous star ornament, that was a host gift from Margaret Skimba, who has started a website. She is doing this gorgeous stained glass work. It is really beautiful stuff. So I always like to support local business. And Graham, what are you selling this holiday, sir?
Well, I carve acorns into the faces of the old guard. So if you okay, I don't do that. I don't.
Heaven forbid. You're so hilarious. Well, gentlemen, thank you for doing iElect. I have a feeling there's going to be a lot more coming from you in the year ahead in terms of keeping council's feet to the fire on their progressive commitments. And I love having you here on the OShow. We'll keep doing that too. And we'll see you again soon. Thank you for being on the OShow. And you can catch past episodes of the OShow on YouTube. Subscribe. We've got a good number of subscribers now. Subscribe to YouTube. It'll be an easy way to see the latest episodes of the OShow. And thanks everybody for watching. Stay safe out there, Hamilton.